The first time I saw her, I gave her a week, maybe less. I know how that sounds now. I'm not proud of it. But you spend enough years around men who bleed the same and bury the same, and you start reading people fast, and you're usually right. She walked into our compound in the back of a dusty white pickup, one bag, no swagger, and I thought, contractor, paperwork person, somebody who'd flinched the first night the mortars walked across the wire. I was wrong about her in every single way a man can be wrong. It took me about 9 days to find that out, and it cost me something to learn it, and I'll carry what happened in that little mud room for the rest of my life. So sit tight. I'll tell it the way it happened. No cleaning it up. Let me put you there first. We were sitting on a nothing outpost in a nothing valley, a place the maps called the Tanwar Bowl, but everybody on the ground just called the sink, because that's what it felt like, a low place where heat and dust and bad luck all drained down and pooled. Late summer. The kind of heat that isn't weather anymore, it's just a fact of your body. You'd wring your shirt and it'd be dry before you finished the last twist. Our little fire base sat on a shelf of packed earth above a dry riverbed, walls of Hesco baskets, a couple of bee huts, one long low mud building we used for the medical bay and the comms, and when it got bad enough, for prayer. There were 9 of us there from the teams. I won't give you the unit. It doesn't matter, and it isn't mine to hand out. Chief was a guy named Renwick, big square hands, quiet, the kind of leader who could make you feel like a coward with one raised eyebrow and never say a word. We had Bishop, our sniper, tall and slow-moving until the second you needed him not to be. We had a young one, Delgado, 22, still had a little softness in his face that the deployment hadn't sanded off yet. And me. They called me Cutter back then, on account of a knife thing I'm not going to get into. Point is, we were a closed unit. Tight. We'd been in country long enough that we didn't finish each other's sentences so much as not need the sentences at all. And into that, one August afternoon, walks a corpsman we hadn't asked for. Her name was Vale, just Vale at first. She didn't offer the first name, and nobody thought to ask, because nobody planned on being around her long enough to use it. She got out of the truck and she didn't do the thing new arrivals do, the little wide-eyed sweep of the place, cataloging where the danger is, trying to look like they already know. She just stood there a second, squinting up at the ridgeline like she was reading it. Then she picked up her bag and asked, to no one in particular, "Where do you want me?" Renwick jerked his chin at the mud building. That was the whole welcome. Here's the thing nobody says out loud in those places, but everybody feels. When you lose people, you get superstitious about replacements. The corpsman we'd had before Vale was a kid named Prosser, and Prosser had gone home in stages, which is the polite way of saying it. So there was a hole where Prosser used to be, and now here was this quiet woman filling it, and none of us wanted her to fill it, because if she filled it then Prosser was really gone, and if she couldn't fill it then we were worse off than before. Either way she couldn't win. She didn't seem to expect to. She set up her aid station in about 40 minutes flat. I watched her do it out of the corner of my eye while I pretended to clean a weapon that was already clean. She had a way of moving, economical, no wasted motion. Every item finding a home like she'd unpacked that same bag 100 times in 100 worse places. She laid her tourniquets out where her right hand would fall on them in the dark. She checked the expiration on every vial and lined them up like little soldiers. She found the one wobbly leg on the exam table and shimmed it with a folded MRE box without being asked. Bishop watched her too. He came and stood next to me and said, "Lo, she's done this." "Everybody's done this," I said. Bishop shook his head slow. "No, she's done this." And he walked off, and I didn't understand what he meant for another week. The first few days she kept to herself, and we let her. She ate at the edge of the group. She took the worst radio watch, the 2 to 4, the one that hollows you out without being told to, without a word, like she knew she hadn't earned a better slot yet. When Delgado came in with a hand he'd sliced open on Hesco wire, she stitched it clean and neat and fast, and Delgado came out flexing it and saying she had a light touch, and a couple of the guys ribbed him for it, and that was the extent of anybody warming up. I'll be honest with you, the thing that bothered me most about her was that she didn't seem to want anything from us. Most people out there want something, respect, belonging, a story to take home, a war. She just seemed to want to do her job and be left alone with it, and that reads as arrogance when you're a certain kind of tired, which we all were. It came to a head on the 9th day. I remember it was the 9th because we'd had 8 quiet nights, and everybody was rubbed raw from waiting for the 9th to go wrong, the way it does. We'd taken indirect fire that afternoon, A couple of rounds walking up the wadi, nothing that hit, but close enough to put grit in your teeth. And after, in the fading light, a few of the guys got to talking the way you do to shake it off, telling old stories, the famous ones, the ones everybody in the community knows. And somebody, I think it was a newer guy attached to us named Kessler, brought up the Sargon ambush. Now I have to stop and tell you about Sargon, or none of the rest of this will land. Every world has its ghost stories. Ours was Sargon. Years before any of us were in that valley, a element had gotten pinned in a village called Sargon, up in the high ground of another province. On a mission that went wrong in every way a mission can go wrong, bad intel, whether that grounded the birds, a fighting withdrawal down a goat track under fire for the better part of a day. Men from 3 different teams died up there. Good men. Names you learned in your first weeks the way a kid learns saints. And one of those names was a legend, a master chief called Danny Cross. Crossroads. A guy who trained half the community, whose face was on a wall back home, whose death was the kind that men lowered their voices to talk about even years later. He'd stayed. That was the story. When it went bad, Crossroads stayed on that track and put his body between the wounded and the guns, until there was nothing left of him to do it with. So Kessler's telling the Sargon story, telling it a little wrong. The way it always gets told a little wrong, adding a bit, dropping a bit, and he's holding court, and the newer guys are eating it up. And I'm half listening, and I notice Vale has gone still. She was on the edge of the light, cleaning her hands with a rag, and she just stopped. Not looking at anyone, just stopped, like a machine that lost power. And there was something in her face I didn't have a name for yet. Kessler noticed her too. And Kessler was in the mood men get into when the fear's still in them and they need somewhere to put it. So he said, kind of sharp, "Something funny, Doc." Vale said, quiet, "You've got the ridgeline wrong. They came down the north face, not the east, and it wasn't 9 hours, it was closer to 14. You could have heard the whole valley go silent." Kessler laughed, but it was an ugly laugh, the laugh of a man who's been corrected in front of people. "Oh yeah, you were there, were you?" He looked around at the guys, playing to them. "Doc's a Sargon expert. Read a book about it, Doc." And here's where it turned. Renwick, our chief, who almost never spoke. He wasn't cruel about it, that's what made it worse. He just said in that flat, even voice of his, "Easy, but Kessler's not wrong to ask." He looked at Vale, not unkind, just level. "That's holy ground you're talking about, correcting men on. You want to say something about Sargon in front of these guys, you show us how you know it. You show us proof." "Show us proof." I watched her face when he said it. And I swear to you, something moved through her, not anger, not exactly. Something older and heavier than anger. It was the look of a person being asked to open a door they'd nailed shut for a reason. And she set down the rag, and she reached up slow, and she started to unbutton the cuff of her left sleeve. She rolled the sleeve up past her elbow. Slow, one turn at a time, like she was in no hurry at all, and the not hurrying made every one of us lean in without meaning to. But before I tell you what was on her arm, I have to slow it down, because a thing happened in that moment that I've thought about 1,000 times since. And if I rush past it, you'll miss it. When she reached for that cuff, the whole tone of the group flipped inside out. A second before, Kessler had her cornered and half the guys were on his side, or at least not on hers, and there was that cruel little charge in the air that a group of tired men can get, where somebody's about to be made small so everybody else can feel bigger. I felt it. I've been on the giving end of it, God forgive me. It's one of the ugliest things about men in a hard place. But the second she started to answer, not with words, not with a badge, but by offering her own body up for inspection, the cruelty went out of the air like someone had opened a valve. Because that's not what a liar does. A liar talks faster. A liar gets loud. She just went quiet and rolled up her sleeve and let us look. Renwick saw it too. I watched him see it. His jaw tightened. The light was going orange and low. She turned her forearm up toward it so we could read. There were names. Down the inside of her left forearm, from the crook of the elbow to the wrist, in plain block letters, no decoration, no fancy script, nothing pretty about it at all. Just names stacked, the way you'd write them if you were writing them for yourself and not for a tattoo artist's portfolio. And under the names, a date. And under the date, a single word that I couldn't read from where I stood. Kessler had gone up close, uninvited, the way a man does when he still thinks he's about to win. He looked at the names, and I watched the color leave his face. Because the first name, the top name, the one closest to the heart, where you put the one that matters most, was Cross, D. Danny Cross, Crossroads. Kessler stepped back like the arm was hot. Nobody said anything. Somewhere out past the wire a dog barked twice and quit. Renwick came forward. He didn't grab her arm, you didn't grab Vale, you learned that fast. He just leaned in and read them, one at a time, moving his lips a little the way you read something you're going to have to carry. Cross, D. Hale, M-O-K-O and K-W-O-J. Two more I won't put here because two of them have people still living who wouldn't want them in a story. And the date. And the word under the date. The word was S-T-A-Y-E-D. Renwick read that word and something happened to his face that I had never seen happen to it and never saw again. This was a man made of granite, and for just a second the granite cracked, and underneath it was just a person. A tired person a long way from home. He said very quietly, "You were the corpsman." It wasn't a question, but she answered it anyway. I was the corpsman. And there it was. That's what Bishop had meant days before when he said she's done this. Bishop, who noticed everything and said almost nothing, had clocked it in the way she laid out her tourniquets in the dark. He'd seen a person who had once needed those tourniquets to be exactly where her hand would fall, because in the worst hour of her life they hadn't been, or there hadn't been enough of them, and she had sworn she'd never be caught short again. Now I need to explain something to you if you don't know it, because the guys around that fire knew it in their bones, and it's the whole reason the air in that place changed forever in the next 60 seconds. The Sargon story, the one everybody told, the one Kessler was botching by the fire, it had a hole in it. It always had a hole in it. Everybody knew Crossroads stayed. Everybody knew he held the track. But there was a piece nobody could ever fill in, because the people who could fill it in were dead, and the medevac crews only got there at the very end, and what they found didn't match the timeline that Command wanted to believe. The wounded who came off that ridge alive, the 3 who came off alive, had been treated. Tourniquets placed right. Airways managed. One of them, a kid with a sucking chest wound, had a chest seal on him that somebody had improvised out of the plastic off an MRE and a strip of 100-mile-an-hour tape, done so well the flight medic thought it was factory. Somebody had worked on those men for hours under fire. Somebody had crawled that track in the dark, back and forth, from body to body, keeping the living living. And when the last bird finally clawed in through the weather, that somebody had loaded the 3 survivors, and then, this is the part, had gone back up the track, on foot, alone, to bring down the ones who hadn't made it, because the story on our side of the house is you don't leave them, and if it's a choice between the fast way home and bringing your dead, you bring your dead. For years in the tellings, that somebody had just been a shape, an unnamed corpsman, a ghost. Sometimes the story dropped the corpsman entirely and gave the medical work to Crossroads himself because it made a cleaner legend, and legends want to be clean. And here she was, standing in the orange light of a nothing outpost in the Tanwar Bowl, with the names down her arm and the words stayed under the date, and every man there did the math at the same time, and the math came out to this. She was the ghost, she was the shape on the track, she was the one who'd gone back up. Delgado, the young one, the one who still had softness in his face, Delgado started crying. Just quiet, no sound, tears cutting clean lines through the dust on his cheeks. He wasn't even at Sargon. None of us were, but you don't have to have been somewhere for it to be sacred to you. He'd learned Crossroads' name in his first weeks, same as all of us, same as a kid learns a saint. And here was the woman who'd held Crossroads' hand while he went. He couldn't help it. Nobody thought less of him. A couple of the older guys looked away to give him the dignity of it. Kessler, I have to give Kessler this. Kessler didn't try to save face. There's a version of that man who would have mumbled something and slunk off. Instead, he did the harder thing. He stepped back up to her and he came to a kind of attention, this big loud man gone small and formal, and he said, "Doc, I was out of line. Forgive me." And she looked at him and something in her softened just a hair and she said, "You couldn't have known. Nobody's supposed to know. That's kind of the point." That's kind of the point. I've thought about that line more than almost anything anyone's ever said to me. Nobody's supposed to know. She hadn't come to our outpost trailing the story of Sargon like a cape. She hadn't corrected Kessler to win. She'd corrected him because she couldn't stand to hear it told wrong. Because to her it wasn't a legend, it was Tuesday. It was the worst day of her actual life. It was Cross, D and Hale, M and Okonkwo, J and 2 more, real men whose weight she'd carried down a mountain, whose names she'd put on her own skin so that no matter how many times the story got told wrong out loud, it would be told right on her. Renwick straightened up. He was chief again, the granite was back. But it was different granite now. He looked around at all of us, at Delgado wiping his face, at Kessler standing there raw, at me pretending I wasn't feeling anything, which I was. And he said the only thing there was to say. He said, "Doc's not the FNG anymore. Doc's the senior person in this camp. Anybody's got a problem with that, you come see me." And that was that. In the space of about 2 minutes, a woman I'd given a week went from the least of us to the most. But I'll tell you the truth, the tattoo earned her our respect. What came 4 nights later earned her something a lot bigger and harder to say. Because knowing what a person did once, years ago, in a story, that's one thing. Watching them do it right in front of you with your own blood on the ground is another. And on the 13th night, the valley finally came for us. The 13th night, of course it was the 13th. Even now I can't decide if that's the universe having a sick sense of humor or just my memory arranging things too neatly. But it was the 13th, and it started the way the bad ones always start, with nothing. Too much nothing. The valley had a sound to it at night, not a loud one. Dogs, mostly. A generator somewhere down in the village, wind finding the gaps in the Hesco. You stopped hearing it after a while, the way you stop hearing your own heartbeat, but your body kept a tally of it underneath, and when it changed, your body knew before your brain did. That night the dogs quit early, all at once, and the village generator, which usually ran till the small hours, went dark around midnight. Bishop was on the glass. He came off the wall slow and easy. Bishop never rushed, right up until he did, and he found Renwick and said 2 words. "It's tonight." I won't walk you through the whole fight, partly because some of it isn't mine to tell, and partly because, the honest truth, a firefight in the dark isn't a story while it's happening. It's just noise and light and your own hands doing things you trained them to do while the thinking part of you watches from somewhere up near the ceiling. It's only after that it turns into a story, when your brain goes back through and puts the pieces in an order that makes sense. So I'll give it to you in the order my brain settled it into later. They came from the north and the Wadi both. Coordinated, which we weren't used to out there. Usually it was a spray and pray, somebody dumping a magazine at the wire for the honor of it. This was different. This was planned. They put fire on our east wall to fix us, to make us look east, and then they pushed men up the dead ground in the Wadi to the south, which we'd all agreed was the weak spot and all quietly hoped nobody else had noticed. Somebody had noticed. The first of ours to go down was Delgado. He was on the south position, the weak one, because he was junior, and that's where junior goes. He took a round that came in over the low wall, and it caught him high in the chest, up near the shoulder, in the soft gap that all the plate in the world doesn't cover. I heard it more than saw it, heard him grunt, this small surprised sound, almost polite, and then the wet awful hitch of a man trying to breathe through a straw that's been crushed. And here is where I tell you about Vale. The correct thing, the thing they teach you, the thing that keeps medical people alive, is that you do not run to a casualty in the open under fire. You wait for the shooting to be suppressed. You wait for cover. A dead corpsman saves nobody. Every medic learns this, and every medic hates it, because it means sometimes you have to lie in the dirt and listen to a man you could help drown 3 feet in front of you, and wait, and do nothing, because doing something gets 2 people killed instead of 1. Vale knew that rule better than any of us. She'd learned it on a mountain years before, learned it the hardest way there is. And on the 13th night, when Delgado went down in the open with a hole in his chest, she broke it. I saw her go. I was on the east wall with the rest, sending fire the way we were supposed to, and I caught her in the corner of my eye, low, fast, no light, crossing the open ground toward the south position while rounds were still cracking over it. My whole body wanted to scream at her to stop. She was the senior medic. She was the one Renwick had said was the most valuable person in the camp 4 nights before. And she was running into the exact kind of moment that had once taken everything from her. She reached Delgado. She got a hand on him and hauled this small woman dragging a 22-year-old in full kit, got him behind the low wall by main force, and then she was on him. I couldn't hear her over the guns, but Kessler was near her, and Kessler told me after, and I believe him because it matches everything. She wasn't frantic. That's what got Kessler. He said she worked like the fight wasn't even happening. Talking to Delgado the whole time, low and steady, stay with me, look at me, you're okay, I've got you, breathe when I tell you. Her hands finding what they needed in the dark without her looking because she'd laid it all out where her hand would fall days ago the very first afternoon when Bishop watched her and said she's done this. Chest seal. Needle. the hiss of pressure coming off a lung that was trying to collapse, Delgado's straw-breathing easing into something that had air in it. She held that boy together on the floor of the south position for the better part of an hour while the fight went on over both their heads. She took a graze doing it. A round came through the low wall and opened her scalp above the ear, and she bled down the side of her face the whole time and didn't stop working and didn't say a word about it. And only later, when it was over and someone pointed at the blood, did she seem surprised it was there. The fight broke around 3 in the morning. It broke the way they do, not with a bang but with an absence, the fire falling off, the shapes in the dead ground melting back the way they'd come. Bishop's glass gave us the all-clear before the rest of us dared to believe it. And in the gray hour before dawn, we counted ourselves, and we were all there. All 9. Delgado alive, gray as ash and barely, but alive, breathing, his chest rising and falling under Vale's hands. The bird came in with the first light, know whether to ground it this time, thank God, and they loaded him. And Vale climbed in beside him because she wasn't going to hand him off to a stranger. Not this one, not after. And as they lifted off, I saw her sitting in the open door with her hand on Delgado's chest and the wind whipping the dried blood on her face. And she was looking back down the track at us, at the outpost, checking, counting. The way she must have looked back down another track years before, on another gray morning over other men. She'd stayed again. She came back 4 days later. I didn't expect her to, nobody did. She'd taken a head wound and she'd flown out with our casualty, and by every rule she could have stayed at the bigger base, gotten stitched, gotten rest, gotten a flight home even, and no one on Earth would have said a word. We figured that was the last we'd see of Doc Vale. We started quietly mourning her the way you mourn anyone who leaves that place, which is to say not at all out loud because you can't afford to, but with a low ache you carry around and don't mention. And then on the 4th day, a resupply bird came in, and the dust cleared, and there she was, coming down the ramp with a fresh line of black stitches above her ear and her bag over her shoulder, walking back into the sink like a person coming home from an errand. Renwick met her at the LZ. I was close enough to hear it. He said, "You didn't have to come back." And she said, and I'll remember the flatness of it, the total lack of drama in it, till the day I die, she said, "You're a man short, and Delgado's going to want to know his camp's still standing when he wakes up. I'd rather be the one to tell him it is." That was Vale. She didn't come back for glory, and she didn't come back because she was fearless. I think if you'd asked her, she'd have told you she was scared the whole time, every day, all 13 days and all the days after. I think that was the point of her. Bravery in a person who feels nothing isn't bravery, it's just wiring. Bravery in a person who feels all of it, who's already lost everything once on a mountain and knows exactly what it costs and walks back up the track anyway, that's the real thing. That's the only kind there is. We got to know her after that. She let us. The wall came down a little. Turns out her first name was Ruth. Turns out she'd been a schoolteacher's daughter from a flat, quiet part of the country where nothing ever happened, and she joined up at 19 for reasons she never fully explained and I never fully asked. And she'd been good at the medicine, not good, gifted. The kind of gifted that they noticed and pushed and kept sending toward the sharp end until the sharp end was Sargon. She talked about Sargon exactly once. Late on a quiet watch, just her and me, the 2 to 4 she still took because I think the emptiness of it suited her. I didn't ask. She just started, the way people do when it's dark and there's no one to perform for. She said the thing nobody tells you about a day like that isn't the fear, it's the arithmetic. She said you become a machine that does terrible math. This one can wait, this one can't. This one's already gone and I have to let him be gone so I can save the one next to him. And you do the math over and over all day in the mud with the guns going and every answer is a man. She said Crossroads, the legend, the saint on the wall back home, Cross had been alive when she got to him, for a while. She said he never once asked her to save him. He kept sending her to the others. Go, I'm fine, go see about Hale. She said he lied to her about how bad he was so she wouldn't waste minutes on him she could spend on someone she could still keep. She said the last thing he said to her wasn't anything you'd put on a wall. It was just her name. He'd asked her name earlier in the middle of everything, and he used it at the end, so she wouldn't be a stranger to him when he went. That's why I put him at the top, she said, and touched her forearm through the sleeve without rolling it up. So I'd never be a stranger to him again either. Then she said, anyway, the way people do to close a door, and we watched the black ridgeline for the rest of the watch and didn't talk, and it was one of the better silences of my whole life. Delgado lived. I should tell you that plain because I've made you carry him this far. He lived. He lost some use of the arm and he did not go back to the teams, and I know that broke something in him for a long time. But he lived, and he got married a few years on, and he has kids now, and one of them, I heard this, and I had to sit down when I heard it. One of them is a girl, and her middle name is Ruth. He never met a Ruth in his life he could have named her for. Except one. The one whose hands he never saw, whose face he barely remembers through the shock and the gray, who ran to him across open ground on the 13th night against every rule that was supposed to keep her alive. Here's how it ends. Or here's where I stop telling it, which isn't the same thing, because a thing like this doesn't really end. It just gets handed forward. Ruth Vale finished that rotation with us. When it was time for us to leave the sink, we left it the way you leave those places, fast in the dark, glad and ashamed to be glad. And she went one way and we went another, the way it always goes, no big goodbye because big goodbyes are bad luck and everybody knows it. She shook Renwick's hand. She gripped Bishop's shoulder, Bishop, who'd made her a week early, who'd said she's done this before any of us understood. She got to me and she didn't shake my hand. She just looked at me a second and she said, "You had me figured for a paperwork person." First day, and I started to say something and she said, "It's all right. Everybody does. I'd rather be underestimated. It's safer for the patient." And she almost smiled, and then she was gone. I never saw her again in person. I want to be honest with you about that, because these stories always want to end with a reunion, everybody older and grayer clasping hands at some ceremony, and it makes a nice picture, but it's not what happened, and I won't sell you a picture. I don't know where Ruth Vale is now. I hope she's somewhere flat and quiet and green, somewhere with no ridgeline, teaching, maybe, like the mother she came from. I hope the 2 to 4 hour has gotten easier for her. I suspect it hasn't. Some doors don't close no matter how well you nail them. But I'll tell you what she left, because that's the part that matters, the part I actually came here to give you. For years, the men who told the Sargon story told it with a hole in the middle. An unnamed corpsman, a shape on the track, sometimes no corpsman at all. And every one of us who was in that mud room the night she rolled up her sleeve, we became people who tell it right. We put the corpsman back in the story. We say her name. We tell the young ones, the ones learning the saints, that when it went bad on that mountain, there was a woman who did terrible arithmetic all day and went back up the track alone for the dead, and whose name a legend used at the end so he wouldn't die among strangers. Kessler, the one who cornered her, who demanded the proof, Kessler tells it more than any of us. I've heard him do it. He tells the part where he was wrong. He leaves himself in as the fool on purpose. I asked him once why he didn't just tell the clean version and leave himself out, and he said, because somebody in the room's always the guy who says show us proof. And they need to hear it goes bad for that guy. They need to hear he was ashamed. Then he said, she earned our respect with a tattoo. She earned mine by not making me pay for being an idiot. You know how rare that is. I do, I've thought about it for years. Because that's the thing, the title of a story like this always gets a little wrong, if you'll let me say so. Her tattoo earned every Navy SEAL's respect. And it did, it's true, I was there. I watched the whole air of that place change when the names came up out of her skin into the orange light. But a tattoo is just ink. Anybody can get ink. The tattoo didn't earn it. The tattoo only pointed at the thing that earned it, pointed back down a track years long, to a woman on her knees in the mud doing math with men's lives, choosing to stay when staying was the hardest thing. And then choosing it again, on a nothing night, in a nothing valley, over a boy named Delgado who has a daughter now with her name in the middle of his. The ink was the proof, but the proof was never the point. She was. And if you ever find yourself, God forbid, in some low place where the heat and the dust and the bad luck all pool, and somebody quiet walks in that you've already written off, do me one favor, for Ruth's sake, and for mine. Wait for the 9th day before you decide who they are.